good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another podcast of What Else You Got with Mitch and Margot. How is everybody doing today? How are you, Mitch?
Good. I almost felt like that was the Truman Show opening, and I wish I could remember the exact phrasing of "Good morning, good evening, good night"
Oh,
or something.
yeah. I forgot about that movie.
Yeah,
That's an oldie.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's not exactly what. Actually, it's next to what we're going to be talking about.
What are
Of
we going to be talking about?
oh, I'm glad you asked. So, does a hobby have to be productive, and does it have to produce something?
I think it depends upon your personality, your values, and people often refer to love languages. So, one of my top values in life is being industrious. And so, for me, it would make sense for my hobbies to produce or achieve something because I am an industrious person. So, hobbies that do not produce something are a little more challenging for me. And yet, I see the benefits of doing such an hobby because on I saw one on TikTok the other day that I really, really want to try. Can't actually remember what it was called. I think I might have bookmarked it, but it involves somatic therapy, and it's a way of expressing your emotions through your body. And the person who did the video covered her table in paper, and then she took big, giant bottles of paint. She started with black. She was trying to express anger, frustration. So she just squirted a ton of black paint on the paper. And then she used her arms from her elbows clear up to her fingertips and just got in there and just smeared it and then scratched at it because, she's trying to express her anger and frustration. So she scratched at it and pounded at it with her fists. And then she grabbed the red bottle and squirted red all over it and smeared it and scratched at it and pounded it with her fists. Then she let it dry, and then she tore it up into smaller pieces. And then she has what she calls an ugly art journal. So she's not trying to achieve quality art. That's not the purpose here. So then in her ugly art journal, she then took the torn pieces of that exercise and created a volcanic, otherworldly kind of looking landscape, with some of the black pieces down at the bottom and then some of the red pieces as if it were a volcano exploding. Um, and then I think she wrote anger on it. And then she closed it and moved on with her day. So, so that's something that wouldn't necessarily I was going to say be productive, but I suppose as far as expressing your emotions, it would be productive. But that's a hobby I would like to try just to see what that feels like. I've told you before, I'm working on increasing my emotional intelligence. So if that's a hobby that could increase my emotional intelligence, then that feels industrious to me. How about you? Do you think a hobby needs to produce something?
That is one of the tricky parts because it really comes down to what do you measure as producing. Because on one hand, a lot of my hobbies, in some form or another, align with engineering, so I'm improving engineering skills. But a couple other hobbies I'm looking at, it's one of those that it's not something I would sell. It's not something I would actually use, but it's in a definition art. But it really comes down to a lot of my current hobbies. I'm doing stuff that improves my skills, but some of the hobbies I want to do, yes, there's improving of skills, but there's no practical reason because a lot of my hobbies have a practical aspect to it. Because like I do 3D modeling and 3D printing to solve problems, and so like the other day I needed parts for a project, and I figured out what I needed, designed it, and 3D printed them, and that was that. And but one of the hobbies I'm actually looking at in the very near term of attempting to try is rug tufting, which
What?
I don't rug tufting, making
Oh, yeah,
rugs.
yeah.
And it's just one of those that I don't intend it to cover my floor. It might. I haven't made it that far yet. And otherwise, it'll go on the wall, but it's also one of those that there's no practical reason of why would you make rugs if you don't use rugs? And it's one of those I'm going, because it's something different.
Well, and it can be art. We've I have, 2 pieces of art on my walls that one of my favorite people created, and I think she did it the method you're talking about. Um, she's no longer with us, so I can't ask her, but they are artistic pieces of what could be considered a rug, and they're just actually I have 3 pieces by her, and they're treasured pieces of artwork for me. Plus, they serve as mementos to remind me of her, and I have her picture near one of them. And so, as far as producing art, art does have great value either to the person who created it or the person that it's been given to or the person who purchased it. Um, so a rug does not have to go on the floor, a quilt does not have to go on a bed. They can be works of art.
So here's a question for you: cloud watching, is that a real hobby?
Say it again, what?
Cloud watching.
Cloud watching. I would say that that's a hobby because I live near a body of water called Quinn's Pond, and I have a great view out onto the water. And one of my hobbies is people watching. And so I people watch people who are just laid out flat on their paddle boards staring up at the sky, and so I can only imagine that they are either sleeping or cloud watching. And so yes, cloud watching is a hobby, sleeping is a hobby, and people watching is a hobby. The circle of life.
Why do you say, or I guess stepping back a step is, what would you define a hobby to actually be?
Ooh, interesting. I would define I'm gonna give you my definition, then I'm gonna ask Google because I love asking Google. Google is my friend. I would define hobby as something that expands a skill or oh gosh, that's why is that hard to define? I define hobby as an activity that expands a skill, brings pleasure or joy or peace or any type of emotional release to the person doing it, or produces a work of art and is not something that is intended to bring in money necessarily. It's not a hobby is not a main source of income. It might bring in income, but it's not your main source of income. It's an activity outside of work.
So I'll give you my definition, and I want to poke at your definition a little bit. So my definition is something that occupies your free time that uh, that brings satisfaction.
Ooh, I
Uh,
like that.
as yours, we talked about how it doesn't have to produce something, but a lot of your definition was improvement of skill, producing something, which that also just goes back to how you started off with. You said you're an industrious, so that's the way you view hobbies.
But also, I've mentioned I am in therapy trying to improve myself, right? And so, one of the things I work on in therapy is understanding my worth. And so, for the entirety of my life, my worth has always been based on what what I'm able to contribute or produce or offer. And so my hobbies have always had to have some sort of value to them. Otherwise, I have felt like I'm wasting my time, and if I'm wasting my time, then I have no value. So that's something personal side note that I'm working on in therapy. But I appreciate that you pointed that out. And your definition was pretty much, did you read Google before you gave that definition? Because Google defines hobby as an activity done regularly in one's leisure time for pleasure. That's pretty much what you said because you were giving your definition as I was reading that, and it lined up very closely.
Yeah. Now the tricky part, I do suffer from the I need to produce things mentality, and so whenever I look at a hobby, I look at the cost and I equate it to is there a value that comes from it, and so it's one of those that I've done a lot of woodworking, and so it's the all right. It's going to cost me $100 to build a table. Well, then you compare it with what you can get at market, and you're going, is it worth it? But at the same time, then you have the unquantifiable of what's the enjoyment, what's the pleasure, what's the satisfaction of you actually doing it versus I bought it from IKEA and assembled it. Even though assembling IKEA furniture for some is a hobby, but it really just comes down to are you looking at the raw cost and the value you're receiving, or are you looking at what's in between of what have you done?
Because if you use that as a measure if more people use that as a measuring stick to decide whether or not to do a lot of hobbies would be eliminated because I have a lot of friends who are quilters, and is it less expensive to go to the store and buy bed covering? Absolutely. And so the amount of money for materials to make a quilt and the amount of time that goes into making a quilt, it is not an economical hobby. And so if you're weighing and comparing, could you just go to the store and buy one versus do it? Then that would eliminate a bunch of hobbies because chances are, yes, most things it's cheaper to go to the store and just buy it.
Yeah, which is where uh, my engineering hobbies of 3D modeling, 3D printing, one reason I have it is because it's very hard for me to get certain parts, or I have a very weird, unique use case that I just can't find something that fits a very specific dimension, a very specific use case. Therefore, I make it myself. And so that's really awesome because if you were to go hire someone custom to do it, it costs a ton. But at the same time, it's the if you didn't have those means, you would go, all right, I need a container, say 3 inches by 3 inches, but the store offers a 3.5 inch by 3.5 inch or a 3 by 2 or a 2.5 by 2.5. You're going, you can make one of those work. But it really just comes down to was is the joy in solving the problem or is the joy in the process of solving the problem, even if you never finish it?
You also make me think of our uh, consumer-based society and how much access we have to so many things. You know, you're talking about a 3-inch container versus a 3.5-inch container. It made me think of decades ago. We had a foreign exchange student stay with us. She was from Japan, and we took her to a Walmart for the first time, and we were just walking in as normal. My husband and I were just walking in fast paced as normal, not even pausing to look at all the stuff right there when you first walk in. And then we realized she wasn't with us, and we turned around and we were going to ask her, "Are you okay?" But she was standing in front of an entire wall, floor to ceiling, and those ceilings are pretty high in Walmart, floor to ceiling display of case after case after case of soda, just all these different types of soda, just wallpapered basically. Actual cases. It wasn't wallpaper. It was actual cases of soda, all the different types covering this entire huge wall. And so we walked over to her and she looked at us and she said, "How can you have so much stuff in one place?" So she was overwhelmed by the fact that there were so many sodas right there. But then it took us forever to shop through Walmart because she kept saying that. She wanted a bottle of ranch salad dressing. And so when we went to the aisle with all of the salad dressings, there wasn't just one bottle of ranch salad dressing for her to purchase. There were a gazillion different brands, a gazillion different varieties, sugar free, fat free, this brand, that brand. And she just stood there and she said, "How do you ever make a choice? There are so many options." And I said, "There really are a lot of options." And she said that where she lives in Japan, you want a soda, you go to the store, you have a couple choices, and there's not quantity. And you want a bottle of salad dressing, there's one ranch, there's 1,000 island, there's one vinaigrette. You don't get to choose between brands, you just get to choose which type. And, um, and so I thought that was so fascinating. And so talking about your 3.5-inch box versus your 3-inch box, we live in such a blessed world right now, even with all the turmoil that's going on in the world. The fact that you can be specific and design your own 3.5-inch box on your 3D printer, what a privilege, what a blessing. You know, we live in a world with a ton of choices, and the fact that we even get to have a conversation about what is a hobby and what is your hobby and what is my hobby. There are plenty of places in the world that their hobby is putting a pot on their head and walking miles to go and get fresh water for the day, and then walking back with a full pot of water. um, we I mean, I love talking about hobbies, but I also think we ought to acknowledge how blessed we are that we even get to have a conversation about what our hobbies are.
And I definitely agree that there's the great blessing of all the different hobbies. And as you kind of pointed out, um, that depending on where you're at, you can have different options, whether they're limited or whether they're abundant. And because I'm just thinking through going, so I live in a city, which means I can't do a ton of outdoorsy stuff unless I go travel super far. But for the people who live in rural areas or mountainous areas, there's plenty of outdoor hobbies to do. And so it really just comes down to what you have access to and what you want to try.
We have a lot of varieties. I enjoy my hobbies. Do you consider exercising a hobby?
So, going off of the simple definition that I listed of something you do in your spare time that brings uh, pleasure or satisfaction, then yes, some people they absolutely love exercising. Heck, there's even an entire there's a couple different types of hobbies, such as bodybuilding, which is straight up competition, which some people do in their leisure time. There's swim competitions. There's uh, various leagues for all the different sports, and so it's a hobby, and people do different things in the different roles.
Do you think watching TV is a hobby?
For some people, it's what they do in their spare time, and they thoroughly enjoy it. I know some people that I believe the term is audiophile, where they or audiophile, something like that, where they go through all kinds of music, and they've got different headphones for different kinds of music because they can hear the difference because that's what
Mm.
they enjoy. And it really comes down to some people, based off of their senses, they have different hobbies to do different things. Some people, they're colorblind and somehow they do art, while other people, they go, I'm colorblind, I can't touch art, but they can hear nuanced tones and sounds and music. There's some people that they have very nuanced taste buds, and so they enjoy food a little too much. But there's just so many things that, based off of your ability, you can go try something else.
Well, and for the definition of hobby from Google, an activity done regularly in one's leisure time for pleasure. Um, I I also think that a hobby can be spending time with people you enjoy being around doing their hobbies too. Um, so because if I enjoy being around, I mean, I enjoy target shooting, I do. It's not a hobby I seek out independently on my own, but anytime you're around and you ask me, "Hey, you wanna go target shooting?" I'm like, "Absolutely, I would love to." Because number 1, I love spending time with you, and, um, and you make target shooting so much fun. You know, you're knowledgeable, you're skilled in it, you know how to do it, and, um, I love target shooting with you. And so that's a hobby I only do with you. And so I think that there can be I think it's good to have a repertoire of hobbies, some that you enjoy doing with specific people, some that you enjoy doing independently, because then you've got, again, back to the idea of choices. You've got choices. If you're spending the day by yourself, pick a hobby that you enjoy doing by yourself.
So that actually brings up three thoughts for me. One is just kind of going back to trying other people's hobbies. Some people's hobby is literally just going around sampling what everyone else is doing. And then adjacent to that, I suffer from the ADHD hobby phenomenon where you buy everything, you try it once, then you move on to the next thing, which that is a common problem. But it really comes down to I try to be a little bit more particular on what I choose, which is where if I have the opportunity to do someone else's hobby, they already have the stuff and they're willing to let you participate in it so you can see how much you like it before you have to incur the startup cost of a hobby. And some hobbies have a high cost, other hobbies have a low cost. And then the third thought was definitely have a you hobby, a you with lots of time hobby, a friend hobby, a couple's hobby, a family hobby, and there's all kinds of different categories that you can do because there's some that you need 12 people to do. Well, now your hobby is to find 12 people, and then you can do that one. Others, it's very hard for someone else to jump in because it's very much a one person process. But some people have figured out how to take those one people processes and then a second person, and there's just so many different ways to do hobbies because kind of like what you're talking, what you start off with art and just smearing around the paint. Someone could be a director saying, "Hey, you need to put a little bit more of this here, a little bit more there," and they might not be in the paint, but they're helping participate in the hobby.
Well, and I can't remember if I said this to you on a previous podcast or if I said it to a friend, but I was talking with a friend about activities and hobbies and um and the topic of money and deciding came up, and I suggested the idea of, because where I live there are community education classes and they will mail out multi-page flyer with all of the upcoming classes and descriptions of them. And most community ed classes are free. And so, what I had suggested to her, and I think this would be a great idea for any couples, any friend groups who have trouble deciding what hobby to do next, put the pages, one, two, three, 4 pages up on a wall that you don't care if it, gets dinged. Tape them up there and then get a dart that has a metal tip. Close your eyes and just throw the dart, and whatever hobby it lands on, I suppose you could use like a paint gun or a Nerf gun also, but whatever hobby it lands on, that's the hobby you're going to try next with that partner or friend or group. Go do that hobby. And you had mentioned the idea of some hobbies take more people. Well, a community ed class is a great way to explore that option, because if it's something that takes more people, well, more people are going to sign up for that community ed class. And in theory, you also then don't have to make that big investment of starting a new hobby when you do a community ed class. You can go try it out for a minimal supplies fee and see if you like it. And you might make new friends that way too.
So I got two thoughts. Apparently, I'm counting down. So you keep saying throw a dart and go try that new hobby. Well, at that point, it's an activity, and your hobby is sampling hobbies. And because the definition of hobby is something done regularly. And so if you go and do it once, it's not a hobby, but you sampled what for some is a hobby. And so for you, it's an activity. And then so there's different groups that tend to have common hobbies like woodworking, uh, acting, and a couple other big ones that I can't think of, comedy clubs. And so, yes, you can sign up for those and go participate in them. But the cool thing is, like with maker spaces or hacker spaces, depending where you're at in the world and what they're called, there's sometimes a organization, a group that come together, pool money, tools, resources, and they rent out a location or have a library of tools that you can try check them out. And so that's one way to participate in a hobby without the initial upfront. You may have to pay membership dues, but those dues are probably far less than if you were to go buy one of the tools or two of the tools. But it's and we'll give you the opportunity to go try the tools. And in many cases, there's people there to teach you how to do it. And so there's plenty of options. So whatever you're interested in, if you don't like the upfront cost idea, go see if there's a class you can take. Because there's a couple of art studios that offer 1 day classes that you can go try painting out for a day. You didn't have to pay anything except for the class fee, and you get to walk away with art. And there's just so many different things where you don't have to have the initial cost to try something.
Yeah, I love that idea. I also love it to like commemorate um, significant days in your life too. Because, for example, I was always curious about art blowing. Not sure, I never really felt like it was something I wanted to pursue as a hobby, but I was curious about it. And
You
so
said art blowing or glass blowing?
I have no idea what I said. I meant glass blowing.
Okay.
Did I say art blowing?
Yeah, I'm
May-
going. I haven't heard of that
may-
one.
Maybe I've created a new type of art. That could
Some
be
artists do blow their paint, so
right. Put some paint in a straw and blow it. That could be funny. No, I meant art. No, oh my word. Did I mention I took a
glass.
sleeping pill last night? Glass blowing. Um, and so for my 50th birthday, I signed me and a friend up to go and take a glass blowing class. By the title alone, you would think that it would involve some sort of blowing, but for some reason in my head, I just thought it was sticking something in a hot fire and then manipulating the hot glass to create a work of art. Um, so when they explained to me that you would have to put your mouth on the end of this long metal, but it's not called a tube,
Pole
pole,
pipe,
pipe,
whatever.
I was like, I don't think so. What are our other options? And and so I made a beautiful, well, I probably shouldn't say I made it. I supervised the expert making it, and we made a beautiful paperweight. And so now every time I look at the paperweight, um it it makes me think of the positive experience I had in an art blowing class. No, why do I keep saying art blowing? Glass blowing. And it reminds me of the friend that went with me, and it reminds me that I commemorated my 50th birthday in a fun way. So trying, and I've not gone back since because I have no desire to do that as a hobby. I just wanted to experience what other people love as a hobby.
And I just want to point something very interesting out. So you say you create a paperweight. Paperweight has more value than just the useless car you have parked in the driveway, but there is value even if other people just call it a paperweight.
Yeah, it's a beautiful paperweight. I love it.
Well, cool. There's plenty of hobbies to do. There's plenty of things to try and sample. Tell us in the comments what you thought was a cool piece of advice or what your favorite hobby is. Like, comment, subscribe, send us pictures. We always like seeing what people have done.
Yeah.
And that's it for this one. With what else you got with Mitch and Margot, and we'll see you on the next one.